Hello, everyone. Hello, we are live. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be revealing the key findings from the National Clearing Survey 2020. Just to firstly give you the overview, for those of you that might not be as aware of the NCS, the National Clearing Survey, and what it is. National Clearing Survey is a major research initiative. It's one of its kind, and it analyses the clearing journey from the point of view of the student. We launched it back in 2015, so the results of this year have been benchmarked against the findings from the previous 5 years of research. And that allows us to look at short and long-term trends, but ultimately, it makes it the most insightful NCS we've ever produced. So very excited to talk you all through it. Ultimately, it's an invaluable tool if you work in HE or FE and you participate in clearing each year. It allows you to understand the trends, identify potential target segments, and really learn how to position your offering effectively within the market. Of course, this can only happen with the help of our partner institutions. So a huge thank you to everyone who did participate in 2020. And if you didn't, now's your chance. If you do go to nationalclearingsurvey.com, you can download this year's report as well as sign up for 2021's National Clearing Survey. And there should be someone putting that in the chat now, so you can go directly to the links from the webinar. So just agenda for the day. Firstly, I'm going to be setting the scene, talking about clearing 2020 and where we are now. Then we're going to go through the overview of the data we've collected in the most recent NCS, the key audience segments, and then the 4 main key findings from this year's survey. We're going to have sections after each of those key findings where our panelists can discuss and analyse the findings, and also a Q&A at the very end as well. So your opportunity to ask questions, and we'll endeavour to answer as many as possible. Please pop them in. It looks like we've got questions in the chat box already, but also in the Q&A box, if you like. We'll monitor it all, and then we'll answer all the questions that come in. And if you would like to discuss findings further beyond the webinar, then please get in touch and book a one-on-one consultation with one of our strategists, most likely me. Okay, so on to the webinar. So panelists for today, I'll kick off. I'm Nick Wilmer. I'm Head of Client Strategy. I've been working in education marketing for over 11 years now. My primary role at Natives is to work with our clients to develop their marketing strategy, but also to analyse insights and knowledge from the sector, and we feed that into client plans and thought leadership that's led from Natives. And in this webinar, I'm going to be your host and lead the discussion with the panelists. Over to you, Kaz.
Hi, I'm Cass. I lead our research function at NetNatives. I've been working in market research in the higher education sector for almost 6 years now. I created the NCS back in 2015, so it's really great for me to see how it's grown over the years, and being able to partner with so many of you on the different reports. So I'm really looking forward to sharing our findings with you, and I hope you will find them really interesting.
Great, and I'm Charlene Allen. I've been working in higher education now for around 22 years. In that time, I've worked for Portsmouth University, Southampton University and Reading University. And my most recent role was Director of Student Recruitment and International Relations before becoming a consultant advisor to universities and organisations. And I'm really pleased to see so many familiar faces in the attendees list and lots of new ones as well. So I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Charlene. Yeah, we've got lots of people on the webinar today, which is great. Okay, so on to the first part. So first I wanted to set the scene, looking at data from across the sector, so not just the NCS, but all the data sources we could find. So firstly, without wanting to go over old ground, I'm sure everyone's fairly up to date on the events of clearing last year. So suffice to say, it was likely the most turbulent, confusing clearing the sector has ever experienced. Well done to everyone for getting through it. Well done for everyone for being responsive and doing their very best. I think one of the big things that we wanted to look at was the impact of COVID. Obviously the cancelling of exams, the last minute government U-turn, and how that had an impact on students last year going through clearing. Especially looking at how those events may have affected those from disadvantaged backgrounds, or possibly from those studying outside of the UK as well, and how things changed for them during that process. Just some stats to begin with. So, from NCS, 7 in 10 students are telling us that they were negatively impacted by the pandemic. 7 out of 10 said, 10 out of 10 most likely were impacted negatively. I think we all were. It definitely wasn't a fun time for anyone. 1 in 3 did say that COVID-19 presented a barrier to them studying at university. And some of the concerns around quality of online learning experience, the lack of social interaction, financial barriers, and obviously health concerns as well. So we can cover some of those later on. But there were also some rays of hope in the sector as well, especially around the creativity and the resilience in supporting students and providing access to learning opportunities relatively quickly for the sector. So well done again, everyone, for getting through that and for doing it. A record UK 18-year-old application rate of 41.5% and an acceptance rate of 89.1%. So actually acceptances were up 7% year on year. And we saw overall growth in all of the 5 polar groups, significant growth though in the mature student acceptances. So those potentially who are upskilling or reskilling after the effects of COVID. And also, quite interestingly, inspiration from the health sector. So some of that amazing work that doctors and nurses and people who are working in the health service actually inspired quite a lot of people to make more applications for health and health science degrees and courses, which is a really nice outcome. Looking at sort of timings, clearing activity did happen a lot later than usual. Obviously, initially numbers were down to begin with after A-level results, but then we saw a marked increase in later placements as students dealt with the government U-turn. So not surprising, that's when everyone got very, very active. More students, we did notice that more students were choosing to study closer to home. So a trend that was seen across all the age groups and not just in the mature student group. In particular, those in the north were more likely to stay closer to home, and those in the south were slightly more willing to travel. And of course, the much feared mass deferral that everyone was concerned about happening didn't occur. There was a modest 0.3% increase in deferrals, but nothing world changing. And that was compared to 2019-2020. But applications from EU students were obviously affected, most likely by Brexit. So year on year increases, we saw obviously the rise in 18-year-olds. Overall, another increase in those applying for university next year, potentially because of that, that increase in potential 18-year-old candidates coming into the system. And also the low number of jobs potentially, so that, that obviously means that a higher number of people are applying. So we could expect to see a lot more entering into clearing next year, with a potential recession looming and job scarcity on the horizon. I think one of the most interesting things from all the data and the NCS data is this marked increase in those applying direct to clearing, so not following the traditional clearing pathway. And it's definitely becoming like an active choice for applicants, so secure their place at university, but in a way that suits them. And this has been further accelerated by the pandemic. Students are leaving their decisions later, or even very late into the recruitment cycle. And that allows them to have the very latest up-to-date information for what courses are available once they get in there. And that's something we'll delve into in quite a lot more detail later on in the webinar, and we'll look at that segment in particular. Then just looking at some of the average and aggregated figures from our own advertising campaigns during clearing. Overall, we saw an increase in average spend, increase in clicks and engagements with ads that we're running, number of calls that were tracked through the system as well. That's not hugely surprising with everything that was going on. A lot more activity and spend was going into the market to try and secure market share during clearing. Interestingly, we did see decreased CPCs, and I was interested in that figure. So we asked the data team and the paid media team, and largely it was down to this year we were using fully automated bidding. And we also found that clients had done enough prep on search strategies. So no one was trying to make up things on the fly or any sort of further loss into the day with high manual bids. And everyone seemed to be a lot better planned out. So that was good to see. So however, ultimately, clients and data we had showed that there's some actual real success stories for clearing 2020. But now, I'm going to hand you over. It's the moment you've all been waiting for. I'm going to build the pressure massively before Cass takes over. I'm going to hand you over to take you through the findings of NCS.
Thanks, Nick. Not so much for the pressure, but handing you over. Yes, I just wanted to start with a couple of slides looking at the sample of the survey for this year. So we can go to the next slide. So this year we surveyed just over 3,500 clearing students, which meant that we analysed over 500,000 data points. So you can imagine Excel wasn't really very happy with that. And we had 38 of you to partner with to make this happen. So thank you again for everyone who partnered with us. And that included 1 in 3 Russell groups, 1 in 5 post-92 institutions. But how the survey works is that institutions can send it out to anyone who enrolled, applied or inquired to them over the clearing period. So we actually had responses from students going to 103 different HE institutions in the UK. So really quite like representative across the board. And then looking at kind of the overall demographics of this year's survey and who that kind of average clearing student is, we see that they're slightly older than they were last year. Last year they were 20.2 and this year they're 20.4. Very similar male-female split, however slightly more female. And on average high UCAS points. So last year was 110 and this year is 122. Obviously we know that how grades were calculated this year was completely different. And this is very much in line with what UCAS are reporting. And you can see this map here of responses from across the whole of the UK, with England being the most represented there. But we obviously know that this kind of student isn't typical of any university, which is why we've broken this down into our distinct segments. So this academic year, with everything that is and has and still is changing, we wanted to check if there was a new segment, perhaps a one-off kind of COVID segment, those that are only going to university because of COVID, but we found this wasn't actually the case. So although there is not a distinct COVID segment, all segments were in some way affected by COVID, and we've detailed this in their different profiles. So this year we have the same 4 segments that we've seen in previous years. So these are the traditional clearing students. So these students that have gone through clearing because they either didn't get the grades they needed or because they didn't receive any offers when they originally applied. The adjustment student, so students that have gone through clearing because they achieved better grades than they expected and were therefore able to upgrade. The direct applicant, so as kind of Nick spoke about earlier, these were students who didn't apply in the traditional cycle and only applied to university through the clearing process. And finally, the mind changer. So they go through clearing not because they have to, but because they've changed their mind on something, normally socioeconomic reasons, such as a different place to study or a different university or a different course. And when looking at market share from 2016, so when we first created these segments, to now, we can see that the direct applicant is the only segment that has grown, and it's been growing year on year. So last year it was 33% of the market share, and this year we've found that it's 35% of our clearing population. However, we can see the traditional clearing student there is still the biggest at 40%, but the direct is definitely catching it up. And for all of our partners, you'll be able to use your own raw data from taking part to identify how your market share for each of these segments has changed over time. So you know which segments you're going to really need to focus on this year. But we're now going to spend a bit of time just going through each of these segments so you have a really good idea of who they are. So we're going to start with the largest segment, so the traditional clearing student. They're the youngest with an average age of 19. They're most likely to want to study biological sciences, humanities or social sciences. They had the joint least UCAS points of 120. And And all the segments that we kind of spoke about, their top 3 motivations are the course, career prospects and modules. However, for the traditional student, they over-index on motivations around the institution being a roster group, the accommodation availability, and also the online learning quality there. And the top barriers for this group are the living costs, the entry requirements, and also COVID-19. So a third of this group start their research early, so June or before, but they're almost equally as likely to do no research at all. Parents are the top influencer for all groups, but the traditional student is the only one where the uni staff appears in the top 3 as well. So you've definitely got more influence and sway over this group. They're the most active on Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, and TikTok on a daily basis. So that's where you're going to be able to find them. And they also experience the most negative emotions when they receive their grades. So feeling sad, disappointed, and angry, which then goes to feeling stressed, anxious, and nervous when they search for a place. And they finally end up feeling mostly relieved, happy, and excited. So it is a positive story in the end. And this group were most impacted by COVID, with 73% actively stating that COVID impacted them in some way. We then move on to the direct applicant. So this is the second largest group with 35% of the sample. They're the oldest at 22.5, and over 50% of this group actually received their results in 2019 or before. So they're coming back into education, a lot of them. They're most likely to then go on to a post-92 or other institution and study subjects allied to medicine, such as nursing, as well as social sciences, business and accounting. They had the joint lowest UCAS points with the traditional student, as we just saw, of 120. And their top motivators are the same for all profiles, but they over-index on being close to home, the funding available, and the tuition costs. And this is mirrored in the barriers, with the cost being some of the biggest things here for this group. They're the highest first gen group, with 57% of this group with their parents not going to university. And almost half of this group did no research prior to clearing at all. And unlike the other profiles, Facebook actually features in their top 4 daily social media channels. And unlike the traditional student, they're much more positive generally throughout the process. However, they still experience that nervousness, the anxiety and the stress when they're actually searching for a place. And our third segment is the mind changer. And this accounts for almost a quarter of the audience. And they've got the highest proportion of females to males. And unlike the traditional and direct students, mental health is one of the top 3 barriers when they're thinking about going to university. So they definitely need more reassurance and care here. This group is most likely to start their research by June, with 44% as early researchers. And they're very similar social and traditional media patterns to the traditional student. And like the direct, they're also mostly positive throughout the process, again, because they've decided to go through clearing. It's been an active choice for them. And our final group, and the smallest group, is the adjustment student. And we've seen this decline quite a bit throughout the years. And this mirrors UCAS's data as well. They're most likely to attend a roster group and then either study business or STEM subjects. They've got the highest UCAS points of all groups with 133. And again, this is higher than the average we saw for this group last year. And then they over-index on the course rankings and TEF when it comes to motivators. They are the group that's most likely to start their research early, with 53% doing this, so before June. And unlike the other groups, teachers at their schools are very influential to them. So those outreach programs are going to be really important here for this group and converting them. So that brings us to the end of a quick summary, I guess, of each of the different segments.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Cass. Okay, so now we're going to be brave and we're going to try a poll to wake everyone up and to get some engagement going through. So I'm hoping that the poll is going to go live. And there it is, we're live. So what I'd like to know, or we'd like to know, is which segment do you currently need the most help to recruit with for next year? Traditional, direct, adjustment, mind changer. And now I'm meant to be vamping while I'm waiting for everyone to finish off the questions, but I'm not sure what to say, apart from turning it into a bit of a horse race. We've got direct applicant coming up at the beginning. Okay, Let's just give it another few seconds. Okay, looks like we've finished. Can we end the poll then, please? And show the results. There we go. Okay, so interestingly, the segment that people need the most help with is the direct applicant segment. That's not surprising, given the fact that that segment is tougher to target and tougher to do research on because of their late research into the group, and also traditional, which would make sense because that's where a large number of clearing students are going to come from, and that's where the largest market share comes from, then followed by the mind changer and the adjustment clearing students. So just to answer that, we've now got a section where we're just going to discuss some of that. So if we could just stop sharing the poll results, thank you. And just to address that particular concern. So I think the direct applicant group, I know that Kaz went through that segment as a whole, but definitely after the webinar, go back and look at that particular segment, because that's where you're going to find that information. Look at the difference between that segment and the other ones. Remember, they're an older age group, so the average is 22.5, so we're thinking about age targeting. They're most likely going to be applying to post-92 specialist institutions. They're more likely to be on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Snapchat. And definitely Facebook is one to consider, given that sits in their top 4 media uses. Cost is a big barrier, so cost of tuition in particular as a concern. So when thinking about content and how you position against that segment, talking about what cost imperatives and the benefits to study will be. And again, when it comes to timings, I know we've got no research in there, but actually what happens is direct applicants generally, when the courses come out, clearing courses come out, June, July, there's a huge amount of research and activity happening around then. So just thinking about where you're placing your spend and what times in the clearing cycle that you're going after the direct applicant. It's not going to be an early brand campaign. It's going to be more focused around that June, July period and right through to try and take market share. And then just to cover off some points, I think one of the really important things to take away from this is the importance of segmentation. There's definitely, I see a lot within the sector, these big brand campaigns, these always on brand campaigns that happen from now right through to clearing. But what you don't see is how people have looked at the different segments, looked at their own research and data, and positioned that brand and that brand offering against those segments, because their behaviours are different. What they actually want from university experience can be very different. So having one message that fits all isn't going to work anymore. And also that traditional student is actually changing all the time. So trying to segment as much as possible. Understanding what your potential segments are. We've obviously got general segments across the sector there, but actually when you look at bespoke reports and bespoke data for an individual institution, often they can be very different from the national average. And that's where you see the opportunity. And that's where you see, okay, we can potentially take market share because we've got group or holding or potential opportunity in our particular field, in our particular group of universities or local competition. Again, making sure that you've got a marketing strategy for traditional and for direct here. Obviously, people have said that they're the 2 key areas. So just making sure that you've built those tactics and those lines and those strategies into the marketing plan. Otherwise, that message is not going to land right with every single student. I don't know if any of the other panelists have got anything to add to that. I'm taken by your non-movement. That means a no. So we're going to move on to the next.
I think the audience is absolutely right to be focusing on the direct applicant. I think COVID. I've said the C word. Somebody said at the beginning in the chat, we're talking about the C word. I think that's not going to ease anytime soon in terms of, you know, delivery of the education and the approach that institutions are currently taking. And I think that's going to carry on into the new year. So the way in which clearing is approached and the type of students that are going into clearing, I think we'll just see an increase in the direct applicant. I think with the potentially with appeals as well, increasing, you know, that might see also an increase in direct applicants, and then the demographics as well. You know, we're kind of coming out of that dip, but I think competition will still be fierce because you've got the drop off of European students potentially from leaving the European Union. So it kind of what could have been a challenging time in terms of places, because recruitment's supposed to go like this. Actually, with the European students dropping off, UK recruitment, I think, will become even more competitive.
Yeah, definitely agree. Okay, let's move on then. We've got 4 key findings to go through now. I'm going to hand back over to Cass.
Thank you. Go on to the next slide. So our first key finding focuses on the important factors that students take into account when choosing their clearing institution. And online quality is one of the most important factors for clearing students. And we hadn't previously asked this question, but with COVID and the rise of online, we felt it was really applicable this year. And as we discussed in the profiles, the top factors overall are still the same and haven't changed over time, with the top 6 being subject, course content, career prospects, institution location, institution facilities, and also the entry requirements. However, online learning quality is now one of the top considerations for clearing students, trumping 14 other factors such as rankings, accommodations, and costs. And when we break this down for the different segments, we know that it's especially important for traditional clearing students, as online learning is the most important factor after subject, course and content and career prospects, joint with entry requirements, as you can see there on the table. But you can see it appears in the top 6 for all groups, so it's important for everyone. But if you're someone who is specifically recruiting that traditional clearing student, it's going to be even more important for them, and definitely needs to be more prominent in any marketing. And so we also asked students a free text question around their concerns going to university during COVID. And through this, we were really able to see the kind of 4 key areas that students were concerned about in relation to online learning, which then also need to be addressed in comms. And students felt that online learning could mean that the quality of teaching would be poorer, the lack of contact time would impact their learning, it'd be harder for them to concentrate, and also harder to understand the content of the course. So there's quite a few things there that the students were really concerned about, that really we want to be able to address in any comms to make sure that this isn't an issue for them, and it shouldn't be an issue.
Okay.
Poll.
We do have a poll, yes. Incessant polling throughout the entire presentation, but I like them. So if we could have the poll, yeah. So what we've done there is, we've interviewed and surveyed students who are potentially going to become students and go into clearing, so what their fears are. What we're interested in is, did that ring true? Which of these statements is actually what happened, or the reality now for students now they've joined, or for the current student demographic? We've still got votes coming in thick and fast.
I do love just watching data just
yeah, no, yeah, just so many responses.
Yeah, I know. Love a survey. Oh, it's close, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got 2 that are neck and neck. Okay, I think we're coming to an end. A couple more seconds and then we'll close the poll. Yep, it's closed already. Can we share the results? Perfect. So smooth. It's working great. Okay, so looking at the realities then. So which of these statements rings the most true for current students based on real feedback? Actually, what students are saying is, it would seem, is that a lack of contact time is impacting their learning. So not so much although I would say a close second is quality of teaching. So there's a potential there that one of the biggest concerns is that lack of contact time, and how that's going to impact things. So again, when we're looking at content, when we're looking at, obviously talking about online learning is going to be so important now and leading up to clearing, because it's going to be such a fundamental part of teaching going forward, and has been for the last year. You know, address those real concerns. We know these were sort of preconceptions, but actually what's really happening based on your feedback and real students is that it's lack of contact time and quality of teaching. So those are two barriers potentially to position against, and to show how it's the contact time is not being limited, or the quality of teaching is not decreasing when you've got decent quality of teaching. Charlene, I know you had an interesting results from another survey you looked at as well, which mirrors this.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a question in the chat section around when we talk about quality of teaching, how are potential students assessing this, and this is obviously people's perceptions, but Natives did a survey with current students, and this was more about mental health and well-being. But one of the questions in that survey was, since on-site classes were cancelled, how satisfied have you been with the support of, and then there were various things listed there, but actually teaching staff and tutors were at the top of that list in terms of they felt that they were getting, you know, they were either very satisfied or satisfied with support from those individuals. So I think it's interesting, you know, they feel supported by the staff that are teaching them, but perhaps it's the delivery, the mode of delivery that they're most concerned about when it comes to impact on their learning, and the quality of the teaching may not necessarily be about the individual that's teaching them.
Yeah, I think what the results of that survey and those findings, you know, you've got students who are happy with the tutors and the work that's being done. So how do you use that as a case study or a testimonial? How do you use that as a voice to talk about your students and how, and, you know, the level of satisfaction they're getting from tutoring, while making sure that you're addressing some of these concerns as well at the same time. So a relatively complicated and niche concept to get across in maybe what might be a 10-word advert, but that's the challenge we all face, to get it across, you know, quickly and succinctly. And having real students talk about their experience is always going to be one of those powerful ways of getting that message across. I just wanted to touch on, obviously 1 in 4 was saying how important it was. It's going to continue to be important. Making sure that you've got that robust online technology and infrastructure set up, and the academics are trained and know how to use it, so that the quality of teaching isn't impeded by technology or the inability to use it. And as marketers, again, I think going beyond the, you know, we've got excellent quality online tuition or provision is what everyone's going to be saying. So what is it that you as an institution have done that is special or different? What is the USP around your online offering that maybe your competitors aren't offering, or that you've got excellent feedback from? And what kind of sort of great stories can you tell from your current students? And also proving how good it is, especially to prospective students, because your current students will know how good it is, but prospective students might not even understand what that concept looks like, or how the teaching works, especially across the different faculties and different courses. So, you know, you can take some real inspiration from the private sector here. Free access to courses, free access to MOOCs, free demonstrations, testimonials from current learners, like I just said, but also incorporating it into virtual open days, so it becomes part of the experience of finding out more about you, and that becomes part of the brand and part of their understanding when they're thinking about choosing who to go to during clearing. Just really important. Okay, shall we skip on to next one, Cass?
Yeah, so our next key finding focuses on a familiar but upsetting topic, I think, for us all. So this year we found that 1 in 3 students reported that mental health and confidence were 2 of the key barriers to going to university. And this is much more prevalent than we saw in the data from last year. Go on to the next slide. And for those who selected kind of mental health as a barrier, the main concerns around how COVID could affect university are around the lack of social interaction. So worried about making friends was something really key here for students. The lectures being online, how this would work, whether it impact the quality of teaching, the lack of contact time with lecturers, as we just spoke about, the financial aspects on their mental health as well. So dealing with like money and living costs for the first time for a lot of these people. And then also just not getting that full university experience. So are they missing out, and how is then that affecting their mental health and their confidence throughout university? And when we look at emotions, which we briefly spoke about earlier when we were looking at the different profiles that students felt during the clearing process, we can easily understand how clearing might be quite damaging for them. So when they were looking for a place, all segments, top 3 emotions were nervous, anxious, and stressed, showing that even some of those more positive segments, so like the direct or the mind changer, still felt lots of negative emotions like throughout this stage. So they're still going through a lot. They still need a lot of support and a lot of care when they're interacting and engaging with your staff.
Okay, just do another break then. No poll this time. But I'd like to hand over to Charlene, our resident mental health expert in the higher education sector. No pressure once again.
Not at all. I just think, I think, you know, as colleagues in universities will know, I think that the mental health of students has been, you know, something that people have talked about for a while now. But I think with COVID, that's just kind of exacerbated that issue further. And then clearing becomes another stressful activity in their lives, and looking at that and thinking about, you know, maybe as an institution what you might be able to do to support students before going to clearing, thinking about perhaps, you know, outreach teams in the student recruitment, you know, what could they do potentially to support students in the run up to clearing or exams, etc. And then the comms, you know, the comms, thinking about what support is available for students, and having that, the support services, and what that means to new students coming in perhaps, and the admissions process itself, you know, trying to make that as frictionless as possible will help to alleviate those feelings of anxiety that we've seen on many of the profiles. And actually the issue of this is perhaps something that supports a kind of a post-qualification admissions process that has obviously been spoken about last year, and also, you know, the increase in direct applicants, maybe that's also a driver for a post-qualification admissions process. But I think there are lots of things that as an institution you can do to try and support students and applicants through that process, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. I think that rings really true. I've just seen in the chat from Rupert, thank you, that these activities have got to be real. So it's not just paying lip service and sending an email and talking about all the amazing mental health support that we can do as an institution, but it's, you know, it's properly signposting to real support, and knowing that those areas of support are resourced, that people are going to answer the phone, people are going to talk to students, and they're going to be able to help and answer questions. And you know, how are universities helping students to talk to each other, break out of that sort of social isolation? How are they setting up, you know, social interactions and keeping societies going in some way? What outreach, you know, the student outreach teams, how are you working with students on those? And then, just like Charlene said, making sure those communications are clear, timely, and empathetic, and judging it in the right way. That, you know, the faster you tell people what's happening, people feel informed, and anxiety and stress is naturally going to come down. Yeah, I just see that comment about Blue Monday as a marketing tool. Yeah, I was getting very angry on Blue Monday when people were sending me endless emails going, "Oh yeah, just buy your way out of Blue Monday." It's possibly just the worst possible positioning as a university. There's one person I follow on Twitter who spends the entire of Blue Monday doing nothing but emailing those companies saying, maybe you should link to some actual mental health support charities as opposed to just trying to sell stuff. So yeah, it's making sure that some universities did it in such a good way. I think we're going to release a post about it from the marketing team soon, about how they just showed their support and gave proper direction to students about where they could go to help them. Because actually Blue Monday was just made up by a travel company. So yeah, certainly. Oh, there you go. It's just come on. So definitely an interesting one to cover. Thank you very much. Should we move on to the next one? Just aware of time as we go.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly say, like, we do ask a question at the end of the survey, if students have got anything else to share with us, and quite a lot of the comments in there do talk about their interactions with staff and students on the phone on the day of clearing, and how that really impacts it, like their feelings and their like views, if they felt like a university didn't have time to talk to them and just wanted to know what grades they had and would then hang up the phone, as opposed to a university that would take the time to listen to them. So it's a stressful day for everyone involved, students, staff, anyone who's like involved in it, but it's making that extra like 5 seconds, even if they're not right, but to make them not feel like rubbish, I guess, is really important. But yeah, I definitely agree with all your comments, like actions speak louder than words on these things, definitely. So our third key finding, a slightly happier topic, I guess, in some ways, I don't know, is looking at social media use. So we see that Facebook continues to lose its trend of relative market share amongst the clearing student audience. And we've seen another year of decline, with now 31% of clearing students telling us they use Facebook on a daily basis, compared to 66% back in 2016. So that has dropped quite a bit since then. And in contrast to this, we can see that 38% of students are now using TikTok daily, compared to 3.4% last year. So that's a growth of 1,167%, which is a big number. So definitely kind of switching their preference on different social medias that they're using here. And then when we look at all platforms and their usage on a daily basis compared to growth over time, we can see the top 3 platforms being used on a daily basis are the same as last year. So we've got Instagram, Snapchat, and YouTube there as the top ones, with those represented by those speech bubbles. And then when we look at how daily use of these platforms has changed since 2016, so that's the bottom row of percentages, we note that all platforms apart from Facebook and Twitter have seen increases in the daily use. However, when we look year on year, so that middle row of percentages, we can see that all platforms have either remained quite steady or seen some declines. Apart from Pinterest, that's obviously increased by 25%, but that just means that 4% of people now use it on a daily basis, compared to, 5% instead of 4% use it. And then obviously we've got TikTok there that we just explained, which has had a huge increase in the number of the clearing audience that use that on a daily basis.
Okay, it is final poll time. What I would like to know is who used TikTok in their last clearing activity. So the clearing that's just gone, did you or didn't you? Just to get a beat on the sector.
This is a nice easy one.
Yeah, you don't have to think about this one too much. And we're already at 111. Yeah, it's speeding through. Okay, looks like we're slowing down. Maybe a few more responses. A couple more seconds. Okay, let's stop the poll. Let's share the poll. I felt like a game show host. Okay, great. So 35% of the people who voted did use TikTok in the last clearing activity, 65% didn't. So a big opportunity for some of you there, quite a large amount of you, to take opportunity of a new social media trend that obviously is not only growing in terms of numbers among that traditional student demographic that that a lot of you said you were struggling with, but also one that, you know, that does increase brand. I think the difficulty that happens with TikTok, and actually I think if we can post the link to the white paper we did for TikTok, just to give people some help. Or I've just seen any tips for starting on TikTok. Yes, so the white paper is a great place to start. There you go, full guide, go for it, enjoy. But just to cover some of the top line points from that, difficulty you've got is you've got universities trying to come across cool and interesting on TikTok, a very youthful and young platform, and sometimes those worlds don't collide very well. When you're thinking about creating content, keep it fun, keep it engaging. Think about what people use TikTok for, which is to look at dance videos and things like that. So how do you tap into that mindset of students and not come across stuffy or not interesting? And make it's you know, it's a user generated platform. So think about how do you put student content in there? How do you get your own students to start engaging? They'll probably have a better idea of how to use TikTok and what resonates well. Look at your study tubers, look at the major influencers that are either talking about you or possibly at your university. How do you engage with them? How do you get them to potentially curate content that works on the platform but on behalf of you? One of the things I think is don't sell. Going back to that Blue Monday, don't just sell stuff on TikTok, because students will pick it up instantly and it will damage your brand. It's about solving problems. So if it's not that fun and interesting, at least talk about, you know, tap into that concerns around mental health, the poor online learning experience, people being trapped in the, you know, living situation at university. What is it you can say as an institution that's gonna help those students? And then finally, obviously we're talking a lot about one platform here. I would never say just choose one platform and put all your eggs in one basket. It's about making sure that you've got the right spread of marketing and advertising channels and platforms that you're using. And the only real way to know if that particular spread is working is by tracking it properly. So if you're ad serving, you know, you can then build attribution models off the back of it, and you can actually see what impact TikTok may have had on brand awareness, you know, for the period of the campaign. You know, which of the platforms and the campaigns that you've run actually have generated clearing inquiries or applications that have come through. Then you can, after you've done a whole session, you can look at everything in its entirety and make some clever judgments about. I'm just seeing our students said they are too old for TikTok. They may well be, but not the new students that are coming through. Just making sure that you understand all your channels and that you're tracking everything down to the nth degree. I think we can make sure that marketing budgets, which seem to be getting smaller and smaller at the moment, are spent in the right way. I don't know if anyone else wanted to comment on that section.
I think I loved Kenny's note there, because it did kind of chime with something I was thinking about in terms of parents and their impact on the student decision making around the institution to go to. My brother uses TikTok quite a lot, and of an age who has children that go to university. So I think there's something there to think about, perhaps, in terms of, you know, students versus, or children versus parents, and who you're trying to target. Perhaps TikTok could cover both. The other thing was the engagement of your social media platforms and virtual events, thinking about engagement through those, and that kind of equating to how good you're going to be in terms of online delivery of teaching. And thinking about, you know, do students make that connection between, or if an institution is really good at hosting virtual events and engaging with me on social media, that would then translate into good online teaching. I don't know, it's just a thought, really. And then the other thing is, obviously, on campus, open days has been impossible this year, and I suspect that as we move forward, that continue to be an issue. So how do you bring that experience into the virtual place, and think about how you make that academic connection with students? Because I think research shows that if you can make that connection within the subject area, it kind of gives somebody a sense of belonging to that institution. So again, which platforms are best to create that sense of connection and get that real engagement across the board.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, we're running out of time a little bit, so I'm going to speed it along. If we can just whip through this last finding so we can get to all the lovely questions that have been asked.
Yeah. So our final finding for this presentation, although there is more in the full report, is focused around how students want to be able to engage with you throughout clearing. And there's a shift here towards students wanting to engage with more modern tools and communication channels. So rather than browse through all vacant courses available, we found that 3 in 10 students used UCAS's Clearing Plus service to help match relevant courses to their needs. And 85% of those who used this found it really helpful. So adding a matching service to your website or throughout your process could be a really effective way to help students make their clearing decisions more easily. And also, when looking at contact methods, we see a disparity between how students contacted the university versus how they want to be able to contact. So 1 in 7 students used more, modern methods such as text, social media, video call, or live chat this year. However, almost double this, so 1 in 4 would like to use these methods and want them to be available to them. So it's worth investing in these for next year. And we also see that interest in all online methods has grown over the years, with more and more students wanting to use online methods such as email, live chat, online forms, and social media when they're contacting you throughout that clearing period. And when we look at the more traditional methods, phone is still key. But although 86% of students called up during the clearing period, 16% of those would have preferred not to, which could, as we were talking about earlier with mental health, which could really negatively affect kind of their clearing experience, and the stress that can cause clearing students if they don't want to talk, if they can't talk, if they're feeling quite upset about everything. Then the ability for them to be able to communicate and contact you in a different method might be the difference between them contacting you or not contacting you at all. So really thinking about how your actions and how you set that up can actually help students in terms of their mental health and not just in terms of their communication with you is really important as well.
Yeah, I agree, Cass. I think there's a potential of mismatching there, so forcing students to pick up the phone because it's the only option, whereas it would seem that they want the option to engage with people online, they want the option to engage with people through live chat, video call, text message and messaging. So yeah, not forcing people down a certain route will definitely reduce anxiety because it allows them to engage with you on a level that they're happy and comfortable with. And making sure that institutions have got live video chat available. It's definitely something that has become a lot more popular over the past year for obvious reasons. So I would have thought that people are pretty well clued up into how to use it. So something we know students are interested in. But obviously still providing that phone service as well for more traditional students that want to come through. I just think it's quite interesting there, making sure that we're matching what students want with the offering. Okay, any other points on that?
I think it's just interesting to note that there's a trend towards online methods when it comes to communications. But when it comes to the teaching, students want it to be face to face. And is there one thing that you can learn from the other to incorporate into it? And is it? I'm wondering whether it's transactional versus emotional in terms of what students, how they want to receive information, and certainly thinking about the review of clearing practices and resources based on what Kaz just mentioned in the previous slides. What's the best allocation of resource to meet those needs? And I'm thinking about the negative emotions identified in the different profiles and how the comms and the admissions process can try to make that as frictionless as possible for applicants. And I think those that manage to do that will come out well.
Yeah, I agree. There's a question there from Albert, isn't phone more efficient? Yeah, I suppose in theory, yes, but I suppose the concern I've got there is you've got a 17-year-old who's very stressed out. Yes, they've got a mobile phone. Have they ever used a mobile phone to phone someone before? might be completely something quite alien to them, whereas they're so used to going online and finding a messaging chat or an email function or something else. And that's just how naturally they use their phones. So you're still using the phone, I suppose, but just not call phones, if you know what I mean. So having all the options available for someone who's in that mindset, you're not going to lose people potentially then.
I think it's about, having, definitely keeping phone. Obviously there's the majority of people who want to use the phone, so not ruling that out, but it's having those other methods for the people that don't feel comfortable using the phone, I think is really key there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I can see quite a lot of chat going on, which is great, but I just want to finish off the final slides and we can come back to all the questions that people did. So just to finish us off then, looking at some of the key takeaways. So with the UCAS deadline has been extended. I think we've got a solid 3 or 4 days now before that. So not a huge amount of changes you can make to current campaigns, but you can make copy changes in a day. So think about that messaging for online learning, providing real access to the platform, improving how happy your students are with the online provision that you've got. Content around mental health support and making sure it's real and evidenced, and you're really helping students out and not just selling to them. We didn't touch on it too much, but again, that financial support, a real worry for direct applicants, making sure that you're providing confidence that students are getting value for their money is really important. Communications in general has been informative, clear, timely, supportive. Let's try not reduce stress and anxiety for students by being unclear. And again, looking at segments, the traditional and direct are going to be huge players in the next clearing, just like they were this time. Let's make sure we've got a strategy for that. But also looking at other segments, so looking at BAME, looking at WP students that may have been, we've not covered it on this slide, but we've definitely done research and shown how there are specific disadvantaged segments that have struggled and have been, been impacted worse by the impacts of COVID, and are more likely to drop out and more likely not to study. So, what support do those segments and groups need? And then making sure you've got a multi-channel approach, you're tracking everything and you're working out what's working. But one bit of advice, get on TikTok, because it seems to be taking off in a big way. I see taking off, it's took off, we're there, but it's on a meteoric rise. So how do you use it, but use it in the right way? And then finally, I'm just going to give you all the hard sell around National Clearance Survey. It's not a hard sell, it's an easy sell. If you do participate in NCS for 2021, you get early access to the NCS key findings and the full report before general release. So you get early access and you can plan earlier for clearing. You get your own bespoke report, and that shows a comprehensive breakdown of your clearing students, looking at some of the things we went through today, so demographics, behaviours, media use, motivators, challenges. Your institution's clearing students are benchmarked against national averages. So massively important if you want to see where those gaps are and how you compare. Also, the students who fill it out get a chance to compete for a high value prize to help their ongoing studies. So benefits there for them as well.
It's that it's free to take part in as well.
I completely forgot that. It is a free, it's free to take part in. Quite an important part, I should have mentioned. Thank you, Cass. So yeah, again, then what it does, it allows you to see which segments you should be targeting, see where the potential growth in market share could be during clearing, how you're going to position properly against those segments, how you can engage students, and actually develop a comprehensive marketing strategy based on that real insight and data. I mean, why wouldn't you do it? It's there. Again, I think if we've put the link in the chat, nationalclearancesurvey.com, take part. If you sign up to that, you'll be signed up to comms for this going forward when the next one comes out. Also, it's not too late now. If you do want to look at research, look at data, have another call about the data that we've got on NCS, then please do get in touch and book in consultation with me or one of the team, and we can go through and help give you a bit of guidance towards clearing if you're not too sure on anything there. Thank you very much, everyone. We're just going to take a quick 2-minute break to go and look at those questions, decide who's going to answer them, and then we'll come back on in a couple of minutes, and then we'll just wrap up after that. So if everyone could just, on the panelists, could just mute and stop sharing screens. Okay, we are back and live. Quite a lot of questions. Thank you very much, everyone who's asked a question. We will cover the ones we can, and then obviously anyone we can't answer, we can follow up with email in the email follow up on the comms. So first question was around our thoughts around how the potential release of the results, or the early release of the results, is going to affect the research phase of clearing this year. Yeah, I mean, if you're thinking about bringing it forward a month and a half, to early July, when we're going to get teacher assessed grades, that is going to have an impact, and we are going to truncate everything and bring it all earlier in the plan, and also it reduces the amount of time between clearing courses opening and then results coming out for traditional students as well. So there's going to be a shorter window for direct applicants to get in there, which is their key recruitment or their key research phase in sort of June. So again, thinking about if you are going after direct applicants, doing it in a very much that short window, and having sort of the lead up to that is going to be massively important. For traditional students, they might have a better idea, I suppose, of what teacher assessed grades they're going to get. So they might be in a more comfortable place with the results coming out. But I know, Charlene, you were talking about how it might affected by appeals.
Yeah, just thinking about the way in which they're now going to provide results for applicants. There could potentially be an increase in the number of appeals depending on how it's all managed and how people feel about what results they're getting. And if that does happen and there is an increase in appeals, perhaps for colleagues to think about that window and what those applicants will need perhaps at a later stage, or how that fits into their clearing process, I think is definitely worth thinking about at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Next question around the numbers of adjustment students that we report on, and are those who use the official UCAS adjustment route. Kaz, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so it's the people in the survey that told us that they went through clearing because they achieved higher grades than they expected. So I don't know if they exactly went through the adjustment route, but they would have had the motivation and reason to go through that route.
Great, okay. One question here is, do we cover the experiences, stats and feedback from students in terms of actual online website journeys? And that's from also looking at direct applicants, whether that affects their decisions on where to go. Do we cover any of that, Cass, in the report?
No, so we don't ask any specific questions on any of on the actual website journey. It's more just overarching their clearing experience.
I think we can definitely. Actually, I'm not making assumptions. I know it to be true that any disruption to an online website journey, if you're making it difficult for any students, if they're traditional or direct applicants coming through to the site, if there's too many steps for them to get to an inquiry page or the information they want, if the website's confusing, if it's not laid out in the right way, if you're using the wrong kind of landing pages, it's going to put people off. And you just every button click they've got to do to get through to where they need to, you're going to lose half that audience straight away. So you want to capture as many people as quickly as you can by having a simple landing page which has the options for inquiries, the information they want, and making it clear and easy for all students to use the site. There's one question here around research last year among Gen Z using Facebook less frequently, but they tend to trust brands on there more than they would on Instagram. Do you think that is still the case?
So I think
I don't really know.
Yeah, we run our student media insight survey, which we run throughout the year. So we measure what different platforms students are using and how they're using them. So I think it's worth looking at that data to actually understand that although people might be on different platforms, different amounts, they're using it for different reasons. So they might be using it to communicate with their friends and family, or they might be using it to search and engage with brands. And we do definitely see differences across the different platforms on how they use them. And there's some obviously some things like Pinterest and Twitch and things like that they use those a lot differently to how they're going to be using Facebook. and Instagram. So it's worth looking at like some of that data where we share that.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant.
I think we've probably got time for one more question, really, because we are massively over time. We've got one around like contact methods and whether that's on the run up on results day or both. So it's mostly when they're actually trying to secure their place. So that could be in any of that like period that we're asking that. But yeah, specifically it's when they're trying to secure their place, what contact methods are they using? Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. That's all the time we've got for questions. Yeah, we are over time by 10 minutes. Apologies, everyone. But they were great questions, so it's important that we go through them. I know a few people have dropped off already. We've still got quite a lot of people. So just finally, I want to say a huge thank you to our panelists. A huge thank you to everyone who participated in the NCS survey. A big thank you to everyone who's going to participate in 2021. And again, if you do want a further chat, then please get in touch with us. All the links and copy of the webinar and the slides will be sent to you afterwards, so you'll be able to easily, hopefully, improve your customer user journey to the right places. But thank you for listening and taking part. It's been a great session. I look forward to speaking to you soon. Say goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.